Okay, welcome to the Basic Skills series. We're going to start this off with maps, as it's a very, or they are rather, a very reliable resource and something that's not going to let you down. And as long as you're in the area of the map of your choosing, or we'll talk about picking a map for the area you'll be in. As long as it doesn't get wet, burn up, or get lost, it's going to always be there for you versus a GPS, which could, get water damage, lose battery life, lose signal, things of that sort. Maps are also nice because it's a tactile object. You can fold it to certain, to view a certain area and quick deploy it that way. You can fold it out into a large scale and be able to look at it, and it's kind of nice to just get your hands on it, draw your lines, maybe take string and trace your route with string to judge distances. Maps are just a very valuable resource. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's dive in and check out what maps have to offer. Okay, so first things first, we'll be checking out the top of our map, and we'll see the name of the covered area. So this is Deer Creek Flat, Ishii Caves of California. And just for another reference here, this map is Mount Hood National Forest, and that is what the maps are going to show. It'll just tell you right away, right at the top. Now, some maps have inset maps, which is what these quads are all about. So you have this red box, which is the entire area that will be shown. But it's also nice that this map includes some outlying area, because say that you are planning to be in this area, but maybe you drift out, you'll be able to use this less detailed but wider map to maybe be able to coordinate yourself off the map and know that you need to head back in. However that may play out, but it's kind of nice to have a map that is a little larger than the area intended. Now these have quadrants split up into fours, so these are the corresponding page numbers in the top right hand corner. So here we have page 1, but if we flip it over to the other side to page 2, this is the number 2 box on the other side blown up. So just much more defined contours, and overall dimensions are, I'm not sure if they're doubled, they might even be quadrupled actually, but it's just much more. So here we'll get a clear look at this and the contour lines here, and then go into the front page and look at it here, and you can see it's much more general. The contour lines are much further apart because they're much greater distances, but as you can see, we got ridge, it's just like a kind of a wave looking pattern. And when we look at it in the blow up, we can still see that same pattern. It's just much more well defined. So that's an inset map. Now this map over here, Mount Hood, so we have Mount Hood itself right here. This is the whole forest itself. But this has an inset map in a different way. The inset map is actually just on the other side. So now it's just a blow up of Mount Hood itself and the surrounding area. So this is just another type of inset map. And they're really nice because it's just a much more well-defined map. Next, we'll look at some legends. These are all, I think these are very good, a good variety of legends, I'm sorry. Here we can see in the quads a very basic legend. We have very basic measurement of scale. So that's, you put your compass up to this guy and measure that to miles or kilometers, either using centimeters or inches. And then here, super basic. You have your compass rose, very plain, pointing to true north. Then your magnetic declination, which we'll cover in a moment. And then the adjoining quads to the area you're in. So Deer Creek Flat in the dead center, and then all the other adjoining territories or quadrants that you can get maps for. And this is helpful in the sense that you can go, okay, well, I'm going to be traveling east, so maybe I want to download the Devil's Parade ground as well, so I can keep my trail going on a map. So you can kind of customize your map for a longer trek from these quads, which is really nice because they're, especially being that they're free. Now this is a Mount St. Helens, Mount Adams map, and this is a more standard legend. So you have all your markers for different roadways, different trails, different types of land, I guess categorization, whether it be private or national forest, monuments. You can see it all there. It's all pretty well defined. Then you have a key for different recreations and or supply points. Various different things, ATV, use or not, campsites, etc. And then down here you have the scale. So this is kind of what we were looking at in the last map with the measurement. You put your inches up to this one, or your centimeters up to this one. But what's important here is the 1 in 75,000. So the best way to do this one, or to look at this scale, I believe this one in particular is 1 centimeter is equal to 75,000 centimeters. And really, I only determined that by this 1 centimeter equals 0.75 kilometers. And then so the math across is adding up. But on a map of 1 in 63,360, it'd be 1 inch equals 1 mile, because 1 inch on the map equals 63,360 inches on the actual land. So if that was confusing, I totally hear you. The way I like to look at this is the smaller the number after 1, the more detailed and zoomed in the map is going to be. Whereas if this is 125,000 after 1, it would be a much larger area covered, but with less detail. So I look at that like kind of like model cars. Like if you like to build 1/50th scale cars, you understand the size of that car, whereas a Hot Wheel is probably like 1 in 125, or maybe you want to build one of the large flying airplane models, which is probably a 1 in 25 scale or something. So I just look at it as kind of the zoom. 75, 63, those are pretty standard maps. That's what I believe both of these maps are. Let's see if this has a scale. I'm not seeing the scale immediately. Oh, here we go. On the other side, next to the compass rose, this does have a scale. So this, and this is a perfect example, 1 in 31. This is the blow up that we just went over of, kind of zoomed in on Mount Hood. So 1 in 31, that's great. That's a good example right there. Whereas on this side, we can see here so that's Mount Hood. See how small this is compared to how big it was on the last map? Okay, this is 1 in 70. So that's a nice direct example of scale right there. Next, let's get into the compass. So we saw with our quad, the true north, TN, is pointing to the head of the map, which is where our labeling is. So we know that when we're holding this map and we can read the letters left to right, and it is pointing to true north. Now, same thing with this one. We'll just get this out of the way real quick. So left to right print, true north pointing straight up, and so that's how our map is. We know that north is letters left to right facing up. So once we understand our compass and we put it down on here, we will be able to orient the map so that it's facing north, and therefore the terrain on the map is as it is where we're standing. And that's very important for us. So just the same thing here, but much more simple. So that's a nice fancy, actual compass looking item here, but you do also have the magnetic declination, and we'll cover that in the compass course. But 16 degrees versus 15 degrees, and this is more north on the planet. So just to keep in mind how that works, true north is straight up to the North Pole, whereas magnetic north is to an island in Canada, because it's just a strong magnetic force, and so that's where our compasses point. So we have to account for that difference to walk correctly, to say take directions off this map correctly. We have to calculate for magnetic declination, because the map is oriented to true north. And I think maps have to be that way because depending on where you are in the world, the declination will change dramatically, whether it be left or rather to the west or to the east. So you have to have your maps oriented to true north, and then you take your adjustment based on where you are in the world. Magnetic declination, another thing to remember, changes over time. Okay, next let's go over how to read your map, the terrain in particular. So these are contour lines, all these different tick marks. And one thing to remember is that this is basically showing elevation. The closer the lines are together, the more intense the elevation is going to be, because there's a 40-foot gap between each line. So in an area like this is a nice, gently sloping, very easy to walk terrain. I don't know about the forest necessarily, it won't tell me that, but it will tell me that the elevation isn't crazy. Whereas this, you're not really going to come up that. You might, but it's going to be intense. Especially if you're backpacking and you have a huge heavy pack, you're finding another way to get up here. And that's why generally trails are decently long, because you're probably coming from somewhere over here and working your way around the ridges. But even then, I mean, that's not a great example, because you will have to eventually, but I mean, I guess you could pick your line through here and kind of ease your way up this, then you'd come up here, and you would keep going along the gentler contours, and travel this way, versus being like, I'm over here and I'm just gonna truck across, I'm just gonna swim across this river and stumble up this hill. No. You don't want to get yourself into a situation like that either, so it's important to understand how to read what the map is telling you. So because the key is pretty poor on this map, I'm not sure what the darker colored area is. I'm sure that holds some significance. Maybe, and actually I can kind of see here it's a state game refuge versus Lassen National Forest down here. So that you kind of have some clue there just by looking across state game refuge, and it seems to be in that area, but then it changes to a different color once it becomes in Lassen National. So that's probably what's happening here. However, that's what's nice about a key, like on these the Mount Hood map is very well designed in that regard and shows you very clearly different terrain types. However, not types, but ownership, basically. So, however, we're going to look at this to determine where we might want to travel. So we can see lots of dirt roads that'll get us, deep into here, and maybe we want to stay away from those dirt roads to actually camp. And so we're gonna look for some water, and here we see a nice little spring. It's right off the road. Okay, so that's not what we want. But let's say, for instance, we're not too worried about that, because actually this map, there's a ton of roads, or we can always just go flip to another one. So we're going to keep this oriented north. So yeah, this looks like a nice little area in here. You know, not terribly difficult to travel through. We can definitely branch out and get in some good distance. We could even get some harder hikes in if we wanted to. But we wouldn't want to maybe be up here and go across this way. You know, that looks pretty steep. So we'd probably more want to work our way around to the gentler stuff. But going on down into this ravine is not going to be pleasant. So yeah, and really it's pretty simple to tell. Once you get good at reading maps, you can see that these are extremely close tick marks, and it's going to be extremely steep, and that could be even potentially dangerous. That area right there in particular looks ugly. You wouldn't really necessarily want to find yourself in there. And you could always, you know, follow your way down through the ravine. It's going to be safest, or maybe up, depending. But you're not going to want to go up the walls here. But, you know, as we zoom out, and, you know, there's some shading and stuff that help you, come on, you silly bugger, that help you understand inclines and texture, basically. For me, that's the way to look at it, is texture. You can look here, high points, you know, it's kind of dropping down, drops down to here, some little hills, little valleys, nice little mountaintop guy here, dropping down, and then pretty much this whole area is a pretty canyon-like area. Very steep drops, left and right, and you know, there's a great creek running through here, and maybe you want to travel along the creek side, but you want to keep in mind too, if you're doing that, you know, it's just something to keep in mind that right when you get into this area, pretty steep. All this is going to be pretty steep, pretty treacherous. Not to say that the water, especially if it's lower, has probably given you some kind of bank to walk on, but if the water's high, you really want to be careful, because that could be cut off. It could be pressed up against the wall so high that you're now on the steep side, and traveling through that is not going to be very fun. So maybe you need to get up in elevation a little bit and kind of skirt this, and then before you drop back down. But all just things to keep in mind with your trek. Where are you going to be? What's your plan for movement? And where are your water sources? That's another thing maps are really good at telling you. If you plan on, say, traveling across, well, these maps don't match up. These do. So, you know, you can kind of overlap, and I would traditionally fold this corner under, and you can see that. Here, let's just do that. We'll fold this side down. We'll see how well the quads match up. It's really super benefit that you can print these things out for free. I would either laminate them or print them out on tear-proof, waterproof paper, so that they aren't going to be damaged by the elements as much. Because that is the one downside to paper maps, is that they are, however, paper. So now you can see that they overlap a little bit, so you're going to want to line them up. Refuge. It's going to be huge. Okay. So now you're pretty much lined up. So now this is all of a sudden doubled in size as the map. So if you're traveling from one side of the map and you're going to be getting into another one, you want to make sure you either have water sources along the way, or that you're going to be, you know, camping, say, up here somewhere. You're going to be like, okay, well, there's potential water spots all along this little ravine here, some pretty, you know, solid blue lines, which means they should be running water. But don't count on that, because I've definitely come across some of these and they're totally dried up. You know, you got this Deer Creek running down here, so you know it's, you know, probably going to keep going down here somewhere. But I mean, if you're camping up here, your water sources are pretty crap. There's a spring, actually there's a couple springs. You got some springs, there you go, see? So we thought it was crap, but then no, we look and we say, oh, spring here, spring here, spring here. There's some conjoining waterway between the springs. So there you go. You can trek along, and right where you're camping, there's some springs. Perfect. Now water is not an issue, and we will cover how to choose a campsite once you're in the wild on a upcoming video in the series. But for now, on a map, what you're really going to want to know is, do I have water, and am I going to be able to traverse that terrain? Which I believe is the real benefit to maps, let alone if you do get lost. Say you're just on a day hike and you trekked into here somewhere and you're like, oh, my GPS just died, I don't know where the hell I am. How do I, what do I do? Where do I go? Well, as we'll go through in the next video, you'll be able to pinpoint your location on this map, and we'll talk about how you do that. But it works really well, and it can put you dead on. You'll be right in the area that you have, if you've triangulated correctly. And so you'll know where you are on the paper map, and you'll know where you need to go, east, west, north, south, and therefore get yourself home. All right, so I hope that was a fairly clear depiction of what information is on a map. It is pretty basic, so I tried to not be too long-winded about it, but in its basics, it is also very intricate. So I suggest you get yourself a map and really study it and play with it and just kind of familiarize yourself with the information that is available to you. There's a ton of it, and it's all good stuff, so just practice. It takes a lot of practice. Navigation is not my strong suit at this moment, so I really put a lot of time into reading maps, using my compass, trying to familiarize myself with how these things work, because they are very reliable. And we'll even later on see how you can just take a magnet, or a magnetized needle rather, and create a compass just from that and utilize that with a map. And it just makes all the difference in navigation, because you can pick a route well before you even see the land itself, because you'll know what the terrain is kind of going to be doing, and you'll learn as you hike around what your abilities are, as far as, okay, those lines were about a 32nd of an inch apart, and that was really steep. Maybe I want to go with maybe more like a 1/16 of an inch between for future reference, until I get more accustomed to traversing strong inclines. So yeah, it's definitely just something to play with, something to practice with, and the USGS quads are free. Not that maps are generally expensive as it is, but the USGS maps are awesome, and as a free resource, I highly suggest using them. Can't go wrong with that. So get out there and practice. Let me know if you have any questions or comments, and I'll try to reevaluate and maybe revamp this video as I become more comfortable and more understanding of what's going on with the map, or if you need me to run something over again, I'm more than happy to do so. So get out, have some fun, and take care of yourself out there.